Awesome, awesome, awesome. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ngu Alex. Today I'm with Johan, and we're going to be exploring math. We're going to go into some, different perspective on math and the implications it has on our society and how we function and how we develop and all that good stuff. So, without any further ado, here's Johan. Please introduce yourself.
What's going on? This is Johan of YoMath.study. Really happy to be here. Thank you for having me here, and
Of course.
always ready to talk about math one way or another.
Of course, of course, of course, of course. Yeah, let's just go into the whole thing. Like, so if someone asks you what exactly is math, like what's mathematics? What's that all about?
So for me, especially the way that I define math and how I tell people what math is math is a set of processes that we do. And those processes help us measure things around us. They help us come to a logical conclusion based on, definitely evidence. What I tell people also that math is not a universal language, and it is not just input and output. It's not just let me do this and get an answer, because if that's the case, then there would be no point. But no, math is a set of processes, and those processes can vary all over the place. So there is no one kind of math. There's all kinds of different kinds of math.
So you're saying that that math is universal, but math evolves.
Exactly. So one of the things that that I try to make clear to people is that the processes that we do in math are very simple: add, subtract, multiply, and divide.
Right. Yeah.
But when it comes to how the frame of thought goes from culture to culture, or place to place, or even person to person, can vary up. We might know, okay, yeah, 2 + 2 = 4. But then when we start interpreting that value, when we start thinking about what addition means to me and what it might mean to you, may not be the same thing. And so that is something that's what's amazing about it, is that you and I could have completely different perspectives of how we do this math or these processes, but still come to the same conclusion.
Wow. So go more into the addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication, because that seems to be like the fundamental building blocks of all math, right?
Yes.
Like, and so how do we go from there to what we have today? Because when I went to university, math seemed so complicated. It seemed so complex. It seemed so difficult. How do we simplify it to the point where we can teach it in the way that you're explaining? Because I think that what you're doing is like so interesting, and I think it's groundbreaking for like how we're going to teach math to our children, right? So
no, first of all, thank you. I greatly appreciate that. And yeah, we got to demystify it. When you do that kind of minimalist thinking and shrinking it down like that, that gives you a bigger canvas to be creative with. It gives you more room to discover stuff with. It gives you more room to mess with stuff. So yeah, add, subtract, multiply, divide, right? That's enough tools. And for me, when I think of adding, or most people I would think, we think of growing, increasing. Subtracting is taking away. Multiplying is adding, kind of in groups. And division, at least the way that I look at it, especially now, thanks to one of my friends, Jessica, I see division and multiplication as very like almost twin brothers, or fraternal twins almost.
Yeah.
It's because if I have one thing, if I have just this one card, right?
Yeah.
But if I divide it in half, well, now I have 2 cards.
2 cards, yeah.
Right? So I have more out of what I started with. Multiplying is adding, and dividing is multiplying from itself.
It's like amplifying and compressing.
There you go. Exactly. And so all of these things, when you think about it, the amount of things you can produce with all of those ideas is kind of infinite. Now, why do we make it so complicated? Well, because there's a lot of complicated things that go on, but a lot of times the way we explain it, it doesn't have to be that complicated. Or why would a lot of people try to overcomplicate it to look like they know something that other people don't know. But by the time, I tell most people, by the time you've gotten to at least 6th, 7th grade, you have all the tools you need to learn other stuff. But for most people, when they get to geometry and algebra 2 and all these other things, calculus, it gets more and more daunting because we don't see any of that really around us. What we mainly see is adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. But you're still doing it in those processes. So if you don't go back to the basics, if you don't go back to those rudiments, then you'll definitely get lost. But a lot of teachers, I think, you know, teachers and those who do well at math try to make it look like they've got some extra special skill, but it's like, nah, this has been around for thousands of years. It's not that
can we explore that a little bit? Because I mean, from my personal experience in academia, there's this weird, like on our previous conversation that we had, there's a weird, like they're like protecting the field, or like constraining the field to a point where it's become like dogmatic in how they even approach math itself.
Yeah. Because, you know, I mean, when you look at academia in general, especially, you know, college, university level, your fame and money and notoriety come from, usually it's supposed to come from finding something new, right? But if you find something new, you better be able to have a way of marketing that. You need to have your professors be cool with that, right? So you're probably regurgitating the same thing that your superiors are, because then you win favor with them. And now when you come with something, either it's, you know, I don't know, less threatening or whatever. But yeah, like it's become very dogmatic because math, especially because we always look at math as right or wrong. You know, we look at it as either it's this or either it's that, and that there's nothing else in between. But no, there are certain things with math you can argue about or debate about, you know, and so this whole 2 + 2 = 4 thing, yes, applied math is what we really care about. When we talk about theoretical math and doing all that other stuff, that's cool, but I can't, unless I can take that theory and actually apply it to something, then we're just really just trying to throw people in circles. So I don't know, the dogma, especially with math, is especially interesting because you think, I mean, I don't know, a lot of people just don't think of math that way. They just don't, and it's a very Western thing that I've seen personally.
And I tend to agree with you. It's there's a from my experience, there's like this like math is like, they assume that math is something that you utilize. But even though I don't disagree with that, I still feel like there's an abstract part of math that is more like, there isn't much utility to it, or there might be utility to it to a different system. Like there might be, like you mentioned earlier, there might be a different civilization somewhere else on a different planet that uses math, but it's a different kind of math.
Right.
So it might be universal in the philosophical sense, but it's not like concrete, like the academia today try to make it seem like it is.
Right.
You know?
You know, it's still, you look, math is still subject to the same let's say colonial mindset, when you want to put it that way. You know,
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
like if you really think about an igloo is a pretty amazing thing. Somebody had to figure that out, right? And we could say, oh, well, you know, we try to act like other people of other places couldn't figure things out. That's what math is. It's problem solving. It's taking the things around you and making it work that way. And was it necessarily written down in calculus form? No. Was it refined over time? Hell yeah. And that's the thing, is that we try to think that other civilizations couldn't have thought, whether it's simple or not. You know, you can have a very simple and effective structure, and the complexity of it is in the nuance, you know. So again, math is often connected with this idea of complexity, and we want to answer those complexities if we can, but we don't necessarily have to be that complex about it. Really, the thing is that I think a lot of times when answers do reveal themselves, they are a lot more simpler than we think. How we get there is the complex part, and that's how sometimes people get lost. But at the end of the day, you know, that's a whole different thing.
So let's in our previous conversation, you talked about how we can almost break all systems or all academia into growth and reduction, sort of like multiplication and division, or addition and subtraction. Let's explore that, because I think that was a profound point, because that reminds me of the symmetry that they talk about in physics and chemistry. There's a symmetry that goes through the universe, through systems, the duality, right? And when you and when you break it down to the point of division and multiplication, it seems intuitive to me. I would like to explore that. That's interesting.
Yeah, no. So that duality that you're talking about, right? The extremes, at least, those things that's in lots of cultures. And I especially learned about it when I was looking up algebra, and I believe it was IFA, right? And when they talk about, I think, throwing cowrie shells, right? It's one side or the other. That's another thing, flipping heads or tails, this or that, positive, negative. There's a lot of those that repeats itself, right? But it's funny because when we talk about adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, I mean, division, a lot of times people think of it as related to subtraction because, you know, maybe the steps that you're doing. But like I said, it's more growth, really. There's only, out of the 4 things, you have one thing that's talking about taking things away, right?
Yeah.
Now that doesn't necessarily mean that they're all positive, right? You know, we said that earlier, that that sometimes you don't want things multiplying, you don't want things adding together, you need less things sometimes. But that gives you a much more objective view of what's happening, right?
Of course.
When we use those tools, when we use those processes, right, the answer you get, whether or not it's what you want it to be, that's irrelevant. But definitely that duality and that repetition of things, you definitely see that a lot. And when you start thinking about it that way, when you do think of duality, which is still a very simple concept, but they can coexist, and that's what makes it complex. Yeah, that's the complexity of it. But it's amazing.
And and this reminds me of the example of breaking bread. Breaking bread infinitely, or multiplying the bread infinitely. So it's one piece of bread, but you can interpret this bread in a way that it might seem micro dimensional or macro dimensional. Right. So it's the same piece of bread.
Right.
So that gets me to think that math is about balance.
Very much so. I think so. You know, you know, when we start making math especially complex, right? That's what makes it feel chaotic. You know, and we're trying to make sense out of the chaos, right? But why would you use something chaotic to try to answer what chaos is? You need to be ordered and measured about it. And you know, we can simplify it down and do certain things in increments. And the more that we try to make math this especially grandiose thing, that's what makes people start having anxiety around it. And so that's why I'm like, you know, let's talk about this math stuff in a practical way. We can still talk about the spirituality side of it. We can talk about the esoteric and the philosophical side of it. But if we don't just, you know, just break it down to the bare bones of what we're talking about, then that starts, you know, scaring people. So I don't know. I just think that the whole thing needs to be just demystified. It's not.
Tell the audience about your background, because you have over 20 years of experience teaching math. So this isn't new to you. This is something that you've experienced, and you've gone to the point where you're realizing that the method that we teach math is wrong. Like it's inefficient. You know, like you said, it gets convoluted and people just give up because it's like, okay, I don't want to. that's daunting. I don't even want to deal with that because
exactly.
that just looks too complex for me.
Exactly. You know, problem solving. If anytime you give somebody a problem, right, or something they got to fix, if they don't know how to fix it, that's anxiousness. That's you know, fear creeping in. You don't know if, well, am I going to be able to answer the problem, right? So when we, that's what we layer math on. Math is also heavily about problem solving. So if I called it a problem solving class, it might actually have a slightly different connotation. Math as a discipline is something that people just are afraid of. And a lot of it is because what's funny is the duality that we throw in on math is either it's right or it's wrong, right? Not the existence of duality in our life, but either it's you or it's this problem. And only one of you is going to win. Right. And then if you don't win, if you get something wrong, there's a problem with you. And so that nobody wants to learn math that way. I was not good at math growing up. You know, I was able to count to 100 when I was 3. Apparently my you know, and me and my father are growing a better relationship now, but like, you know, he's a musician, you know, all that stuff from Trinidad. I found out, I mean, my mom said he was good at math, that he was studying to be an engineer, but it wasn't until I really talked to him about it, and he very casually was like, oh yeah, you know, I would get 100 on tests, like regularly. So I tell people it's not this genetic thing. It is very much your environment. You know, my mom got up to about, it's intuitive, but that's the thing, is that when the intuition gets lost, then you don't know what's really happening. You don't
know what direction to go.
Exactly.
You get disoriented.
Right. Most people will tell you they were good at math up until about 5th, 6th grade. And that's what happened with me. And there were times as I'm learning it, when we say either it's right or it's wrong, use the formula, I'm like, something just didn't sit right well with me on that, that either it's this or it's that. But the longer I started teaching, and then the more that I started seeing the nuances of these patterns, the math notwithstanding, the all the ways that you can interpret the number line, sure. But when I started seeing the pressure people were putting on themselves to learn it, that's the block. That's one block right there.
It's a wall. It's a wall.
Right. And we've compounded it so much in this culture, I think, that we've made people run away from it, or they think that they're not good at math, and they actually are. And so that's, I think, what has made me a effective teacher and tutor, is because I ask certain questions. I'll be like, no, you are good at math. You just think of it this way. And then when I shift their perspective, they fly on their own.
Yeah. Because I mean, based on what you're saying, the rules of math are universal. They're universal regardless what system you're in. So it kind of makes sense, because I think of myself as a child, right? As a little boy, even when I didn't take any math classes, no algebra, no calculus, I was still interested in the abstract nature of math. I was still interested in shapes. I like to build toys. I like ratios. And I have a feeling, I'm not sure if I'm correct, but I have a feeling that young children have a more intuitive understanding of math than adults.
Well, you know, if you think about it, math is almost one of the first things you learn, besides speaking, counting, you know, knowing.
Your mom, your dad are the first two people you see, so that's already math right there.
Right. You know, your fingers, you know, if I want one, I want another one.
Exactly.
You know, and that's already, a very just minute part of it. But yeah, adding and subtracting, we see that all the time. And most kids, you know, when you teach even fractions are technically kind of a weird thing, right? But they're all forms of division. So we, you know, slices of pizza, anything that we see that divides up, breaks up, it's very intuitive. And we see it by the time you're 8 years old, you've seen it.
Yeah. I think what I have to commend you. I think what you're doing is great, and I can see how it could be so impactful, like to like the next generation, and because I experienced the same roadblocks that you were talking about when it comes to like looking at math from a simplified fundamental perspective.
You're saying you saying you look at it in that perspective?
So I currently look at math from that perspective, but I feel like a lot of people don't. So I think what you're doing is great because it's going to allow the next generation to look at math from that perspective, a super unified, because the minimalist, simplistic perspective seems to be more universal than the more constrained, like academic perspective, where they break really fundamental laws into like too many categories, algebra, geometry, all this stuff. Like, no, we don't have to go that deep. We can study math fundamentally, like you're saying, fundamentally as growth and compression in a way, like, you know,
bro. Like, if you the hardest it gets really is with algebra, you know, that undefined thing. Once I get kids' minds wrapped around that, which we all do, we're all asking ourselves, I got $10. How much money can I spend and still have this left over? Or how can I do this and get this from this? We do that all the time. You know what I'm saying? And so once you frame it in a way that people can relate to, that they know that they do, then the process, you just run it through a process. And yeah, I break it down in that simpler way because why not? You know what I'm saying?
It's easy to comprehend that way and digest. So there's no need to make it complex.
It's easier that way. And also, if we need math to get more problems solved, it's not going to do any good by overcomplicating, giving people the tools and how to use it. That's there's no use in that. But I think math has definitely turned into one of those things where, again, where people are placed, what grades they get, what jobs they get, we've made it
their research,
their funding. Right, we've turned it into you know, just for people to learn it. We've turned it into a sink or swim type deal. Either you get it or you don't. Right, that's the duality that we give people, is either they perform or they don't. Not that the math will perform for them. Very simply, as long as you just, you know, understand the process. So no, I don't think that it needs to be that complicated. And teachers would do better to find easier ways, more efficient ways to explain stuff.
Yeah. And you just mentioned, I'm going to go back to duality. You just mentioned duality. And when you mentioned duality, I thought of the equal sign and its implications on math and all of academia.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the equal sign and its implications?
Right. So usually when I talk about the equal sign, I look at it either kind of like a mirror, right? That one side of the equation mirrors the other side, which, you know, it wasn't until actually that I looked up the history of algebra and understood that, I guess, Al-Jabr and at least even the name of the book that Al-Khwarizmi wrote, that algebra is the idea of balance and completion. That's what it means. So that makes sense, that the equal sign is kind of the mirror of the other side. So even if it's 3x plus 9 equals 52, they are mirror images of each other in some kind of way. This is equal to that.
Now, I think symmetry.
Right.
That's symmetry.
Right. Now, I could definitely set up an equation where one side is not equal to the other side.
Correct.
But that's where I gotta read it and interpret it. I also look at the equal sign, you know, in funny ways. Like I look at it like an oven, right? Like if I put these things together, put it in the oven, this is what I get, right? So
cook it up,
right?
some heat in it,
Exactly. And that's what also happens in math a lot, is we don't think of other fun, creative, or quirky ways to think about it, because again, that's what I mean. Like, you can think about it one way, I can think about it another way, but we're doing the process and still coming to the same conclusion.
We're following the same rules.
Right. But the equal sign, you know, when you say that too, like you know, and we were talking about before, the symbols that we use, what the equal sign actually is as a statement, which is very interesting when you just think about it as two horizontal lines. I really do want to figure out where that came from. Why, you know, why that's not adding, and, you know, two intersecting lines is adding, right? Like those things are adding, but these two horizontal lines are not. There's just, but maybe that's what it's supposed to mean. Maybe the symbol means put it this way, put it through here, and then you go both directions.
I think you're asking some of the most important questions that have ever been asked in math. What the fuck does the equal sign actually mean? What are its implications? Because the equal sign to me, I think of, if you go like topologically, I think of homeomorphism, being able to move between one shape to another, being able to move, like for example, if you take a square, you can always take a square and you can manipulate a square until it becomes a circle.
Really?
You know what I mean? If you take a square and you play with it and you get it as smooth as possible.
You're right. Like if you connect the corners, connecting the corners. Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about it like that. And that's, you know, that's the fun part about it.
Right?
That's the fun part about it. And a lot of the math that we're doing, again, I tell people the math that we're doing, these discoveries, these ways that we can find this stuff, you know, it's thousands of years old, and it's a culmination of things from all over the world that we're actually doing.
Absolutely.
So the more that you start thinking about all these things you can create and make from all of these processes, man, it's amazing. But, you know, like I said, usually geometry, you think of this shape is static and that's it. But I've never really thought about, what if I manipulate this shape and even take that shape and now it becomes something else? But the math on that shape is not necessarily the same, even though a square and a circle have to have 360 degrees. But
now we're talking.
Yes, but then again, see, now if you connect those corners, is it going to be a sphere or is it going to be a circle? Is it a sphere or a circle? Because then if it's a sphere, now you got something else going.
So look, it's a circle in two dimensions. In 2 dimensions.
Right. Okay.
But in 3 dimensions, it becomes a sphere.
See, all right. Now we're talking.
and the square in 2 dimensions becomes a cube.
Right.
So essentially, what's going on there is that even things as abstract as squares and circles can be made to become each other. So that's what I meant by the homeomorphism, right? And this is what I've been working on for some time now. But I have a question for you. So, in your opinion, do you think that it's possible that the mathematics that we're utilizing now is actually a lesser mathematics than what was used in the past? Is that a possibility? Because I'm starting to think that might be the case.
I think so. I mean, you know, math comes with a lot of very deep cultural history, right? So if you just don't talk about it, I mean, the whole thing with algorithmy, I believe when he wrote that book, it was lost for like a couple centuries until somebody stumbled upon it and then started calling it, you know, something else and translating it, you know? So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that we have to either discover or probably even rediscover. And somebody out there might have discovered some of this stuff and we just don't know. You know what I mean? But that's the amazing part.
Some of this knowledge, another possibility, some of this knowledge could have existed already, but it's just not being shared. And that's where I get kind of like, I get worried because I'm like, okay, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're not like the notion that we're like the smartest people that existed since the beginning of humanity is, I'm questioning that because it's like, wait, if our math itself is inherently not complete, how can we make the claim that we're the most advanced and have the highest level of mathematics? It doesn't add up. It doesn't add up.
I mean, you and I we're talking through this thing because of math, and yet, you know, we got people worrying about the maturity of our civilization. You know what I'm saying? Like this technology does not make us advanced. It's our ability to think on a higher plane. And yeah, that definitely can be lost. And There are a lot of people that are hiding it or just trying to get paid off of it. And my whole thing is, you know, even for me, I'm not gonna lie, like you have to pay me for me to tutor you, but I also tell people I'm gonna work with you enough up to a certain point where you're gonna learn it on your own, because I believe that it's also my civic duty to make things better. As I tell people, my stance, and especially with mathematical thinking, because mathematical thinking has been left to, you know, kind of rot and what's the word?
No, it's almost been shunned. They're attacking that perspective.
Here's the word that I'm,
yes,
the word I'm looking for: atrophy. We let mathematical thinking atrophy or only be to certain people. And, you know, as I tell people, I think especially education, and you can put in parentheses racism, education is a public health issue. It's a national security issue.
Absolutely.
And if we don't get people's mathematical thinking, their logic, they're running through that, then that's when we just get more and more problems. I mean, look, one of my last lectures to my kids that I had in person was when they finally they were calling the schools out. COVID, we were gonna have to go into quarantine. I had them watch a video where they were talking about math and viruses and stuff, right? And the thing is, I told them, I said, you know, this is gonna get figured out. It may take some time, but between the science and the math, we'll figure it out. But even between then, there were probably some people who knew the math and nobody listened.
No one listened to them. Absolutely.
Right. So, you know, we really do need to start taking this seriously, where we start running things through this process and we start saying, like, let's look at the conclusion of this process and actually ask ourselves what's going on here, and let's remove some of our feelings about it. I mean, everybody's, you know, like I said, some people won't get the answer that they want, but the answer is the answer sometimes. And the more that we just try to sit here and debate these things, all that stuff, man, I'm like, look, let's make this math stuff more palpable. We have all this technology and people are still not able to understand it because now there's too many choices. You know, no, let's simplify it down. Let's distill it. Let's really get to the core of the issue. If we can at least get, you know, what's actually the hardest part about doing math most of the time? Arithmetic.
Yeah, of course.
You know, because if you make a mistake, if you say 2 + 2 and you just blank out and write 5, you didn't made a mistake and ruined it and may not even realize it. Arithmetic is where most people make their mistake anyway. Once you understand conceptually what you're doing, all you got to do is the process that you've been doing.
Like you said, you're either adding, you're either multiplying or you're dividing.
That's it. So why are we, and then sometimes when you distill it like that, we don't really need to argue that much.
Exactly.
Like we may have a complex problem, but then we're gonna work at it. We're gonna figure it out. But that's all these things that I'm talking about. Like, people think that math is just a cold, just machine-like process. No, man. Like, we're talking about something that, besides language, is about the most important thing that we have all around us. And we're saying all this stuff about, oh, everything is math. Well, then why are we letting it atrophy like this? Why are we letting ourselves get to a point where we're letting this sink or swim nature keep going? And now when everybody is falling apart, we don't know where it came from. Yeah, you do.
Wow. So let me see if I can summarize that really quick. So you just made a really great point. So it's just, you're saying that our math literally impacts how we perceive reality, and how we perceive reality impacts how we literally build the infrastructure for our world.
Listen,
math is a limited society.
Yo, that's why I tell people the abstract part, the spiritual part, that part, it's great. But when we need to talk about survival, and I tell you I need 2 of something, and you're in that same position, and I need you to get 2 of something, we don't need to debate about that.
You don't have to argue about that.
And when our reality has to also come from us agreeing on stuff.
Exactly.
So that mathematical thinking is where that's actually what well, besides all the other kinds of math, algebra was developed for trade. you know, so that we can set a fair price. We can do the math. It's transparency, but it's also real. So let's talk about the real. Let's talk about what we need to do here and now. And the abstract stuff, beautiful. That's what gets us to great engineering, going to the moon, really, you know, pushing the limits of our imagination. But if we can't get people to just generally understand how to check their math or how to, you know, do percentages, how to read a contract, then all that other stuff, then to me, it just doesn't mean much, right? The reality, the interpretation of reality through math is very real.
Yeah, it's crucial, and I think there's an urgency right now. I think we're at a point, like you mentioned earlier, with the COVID and with a lot of changes. It's like we can see the urgency, that there's an urgency for us to literally, like you said, reorient our perspective on literally math. And the misconception is that math is concrete and doesn't grow or doesn't evolve, but that's not true. Like you said, math is a living entity. It too has a time function. It too changes. It too evolves. And like you said earlier too, there could be a different parallel universe somewhere else, and they use math too. But their math is different than the math that we use, because their math works in their constrained dimensions.
Yes.
You know, but that doesn't mean that math doesn't evolve.
Right.
Math changes based on your perspective. You know,
and see from everything you just said, you realize how you just started taking your ego out of it. The ego is out of it. It can work this way here. It can work this way here, and they're not wrong. It's that that's the way that it works, and you respect it. Right?
And this would change, like, going back to the issue of race. This literally would change the philosophy of the planet to the point where it will change how we view each other, how we interact with each other, how we work and do business together. This changes. The implications of it are, it's like, I don't understand how it took us this long to get to this point. That's what I don't get. That's what I have a difficulty wrapping my head around.
Let me tell you something. First of all, that's what I'm definitely aiming for. You know, like, look, math itself is not, I teach math with a set of ethics, right? Math itself does not care about ethics, right? You can you could turn into an evil genius if you want to, if you know math really well too. But if you teach math with compassion, if you give people the at least the option to look at the universe as being more forgiving, yeah, like things happen, problems happen, right? But we have tools that, I say math is an invention that we have invented to help ourselves navigate through these things. The problems may change, some things may not. Precedent, right? In law, we say what worked before, what may work now. Now, math allows us to sometimes play with those rules and go to another level with it. You know, but yeah, the transparency, that all of that stuff, that's what it's here for. There was something else that you said earlier that I was just gonna refer to. You were talking about doing business together, us, you know, doing stuff together. It'll probably come back to me, but
our infrastructure is based on mathematics. And actually, I'm going to go back to a point that you made in our last conversation when you talked about WuTang.
Yes.
Explore that.
That's funny. So I tell people one of my mantras that I live by, thanks to Ghostface Killer, is on the song Glaciers of Ice with Raekwon. My seeds marry his seeds, marry his seeds. That's how we keep WuTang money all up in the family. And yeah, right. And even though that's supposed to be like a very mafia reference in a large sense, but when you really think about it, if the fruits of my labor, you know what I'm saying, connect with the fruits of your labor, well, now we got more fruits.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Now
so
we have.
Yeah, look at that. I love it. The WuTang formula.
Hey man, you gotta make that
a shirt, man. I need that. I need that on a hoodie.
And look, and I'm just gonna add another thing. So so as it gets more complex, that's why it gets more complex inside of the circle of the sphere. So imagine just like more curves, more perturbations within. Imagine these should just be waves. Each of those,
Yes.
so the more waves you have inside, the more complex it gets. But the rules are the same. You keep it within the sphere, and you just keep compounding, or you keep multiplying.
Look, man, that's beautiful. You know what I mean? And there's so many different ways to think about that, and that it doesn't, and the math behind it doesn't have to be, you know, I think that a lot of times when we talk about math, it's just so cold and it doesn't do anything, or we start thinking about, well, how can I just make money from it? You know, but if we do teach math, and I think this is what I meant to say, when you do teach math with that compassion, it becomes more fun. You do want to be more creative with it. But if all it's going to be is either you're right or wrong and this and that and all that other stuff, nobody wants to deal with that. That's not even real life, you know. But no, man, that is what I'm aiming for. I'm aiming for more people to say, like, you can approach math like that if you want to, but imagine if you approached it like this, and then how actually it's a little bit more productive when you approach it that way. People are a little bit more, it's more inviting, it's more comfortable. I don't have to worry about stuff as much when we start, you know, if we just keep looking at the world in this, you know, the growth mindset and math are very connected, not only for yourself, but for the things around you.
Yeah. I've noticed that in the academic world, it's almost like they've invented their own language that nobody understands. And they talk about, like, for example, differentiation, integration. They talk about concepts that are actually intuitive concepts.
Yes.
You know, but they make it seem so abstract and so complex that the average
you wouldn't understand. It's very difficult. I mean, did you get through this? Did you get through? Yeah, no.
It's more like a hazing process when I look at it, as opposed to a learning process. So, because I look at education or learning as like opening up a flower, like it's already inside. You just have to open it up.
Look at that, man. Look at that.
And academia is like they actually just ossify it and clog it up, where you just give up. You're like, nah, I don't want to deal with it. It's too much.
Let's keep in mind that education is often connected to elitism, access, keeping people out. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
In a lot of places, getting an education is extremely important for upward mobility. And so if you keep people out of that conversation, or you can't be there, and, you know, some people might say, oh, well, you know, they probably weren't cool in high school and all that other stuff. So now when they get into that superiority, they want to do that. Right. But, you know, no, there's no point in restricting ourselves to that. Yes, it gets very cold. Let me ask you this. As you said, when did you always think about math in this way, or have you been like, is this kind of reaffirming that you've been thinking this, but you didn't have very many other people to discuss it with?
Yes, that's such a good question. That's a good question. Yeah. So when I look back at my childhood, I definitely had a natural draw to, I wouldn't say like mathematics, but to geometry.
Okay.
To shapes and colors and music, which are all mathematical. But I started to really explore mathematics as I got older, and I was allowed to explore it, because it's very easy to have that like beaten out of you in a way, that like exploratory, like childlike playfulness, like you said, when it comes to math. You know, like if you give a little child Play-Doh, they'll make something abstract with it.
Yeah.
You know, so I look at math like that, like it's something that allowed me to look at different things from a different lens.
Right.
You know, I never looked at math as a concrete thing where I had to go sit in class and learn it. It was something that I saw around me. You know, like I made my own toy, so I had to learn ratios, I had to learn balance, I had to learn growth, I had to learn these concepts before I even knew how to do algebra. So that was my introduction to mathematics, and I'm glad it went that way, because I feel like if it went the other way, I might have lost my interest at a young age.
Yeah. Did you ever get in any arguments with any teachers about math? Any teachers, professors, or anything? Or did you ever, or not maybe an argument, but just like, let's say a difference of interpretation, or remembering a teacher saying something and you were like, something seemed off about it. Did that ever happen?
So I'm the kid that always goes, why? I'm that child. I'm always why. And they never had an answer for me.
Right. And see, that's I think I did a video recently. I hope I said this, but one of the things that I talked about is, in a sense, bad math teachers, right? And you're not a very good math teacher if a kid asks you why, and all you kind of do is just say, just do what I tell you. You know what I mean? At some point you should, and some people don't know. Why do we add? Well, I mean, I thought on those really simple questions. Because sometimes a simple question, the answer isn't that easy, but it's important to know. So why do we add? Well, lots of things add. So adding is a part of our world. So we add because that's what we do. And that's, you know, whether or not that's an acceptable enough answer. But did a lot of teachers get tired of you asking why, or try to shut you up from asking why?
I mean, to be honest with you, it gets annoying when a kid asks you why you don't know the answer.
Right.
It becomes cyclical.
Right. Well, I'm glad you didn't give up, because, you know, now, you know, that perspective that you have as you on the search for that, you know, then it starts becoming clear. And that's actually how I got better at math, in a sense, was because there was a day where I figured out a question that I didn't think I'd be able to figure out. And then I said, but that means that something in here is supposed to make sense. So what is it about that I can harness so that then it makes sense? And I had to really think about it over and over again, sometimes do the problem a couple of times. And then I said, oh, okay, this is happening because this is happening. And then when you get that realization, that's when you start realizing even more stuff. But yeah, no, it's got to start with a why. And, you know, even if it's annoying, sometimes that why is a very important question.
It's probably the most important question. The why is the core to most problems. Is why do you want to solve this problem in the first place?
Right. Why? For what?
Exactly. And this goes to your argument about the fact that it's universal. So well, it's there. So the moment you figure out the why, then you can figure out what kind of math you should be using.